Imagine taking an at-home DNA test and discovering a sibling you didn't know existed. Seeing a family member who died 30 years ago is actually alive and learning that you're not actually related to your family. Well, that's exactly what happened to international journalist Samuel Burke. He spent the last 2 years documenting a dozen families, including his own, coping with DNA test fallout. And now Samuel is hosting CNN Philippines' first ever podcast, Suddenly Family. Let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of these family DNA discoveries.
I'm Samuel Burke, host of the new podcast, Suddenly Family, and I need to share a few stories with you about at-home DNA testing. The commercials promise to give you all the answers.
All my life, this is what I've wanted to know. This is just incredible.
But the results actually leave tens of thousands of people with many more questions.
We never knew that her name was Caroline.
I was thrown into the dark side of the DNA world when my own family's life was turned upside down by 3 stunning results.
Unbelievable. Oh my God. That's the worst thing I have ever heard about my family.
I think she had a hand in my father's death.
Well, I get emotional about it. Sorry. I can't imagine what she went through.
On my new series, you'll listen in on families like mine, trying to solve our mystery DNA and put our lives back together after a simple swab of the cheek robbed us of everything we thought was true.
I went from having 3 blood relatives to over 1,600 overnight.
That is so intriguing. That's a preview of Suddenly Family, our first podcast. Now, host Samuel Burke joins us now. Samuel, DNA testing is already popular in the U.S. Now it's taking off in Asia, including in the Philippines. For people unfamiliar with at-home DNA testing, tell us how it works and what are some of the misconceptions about it?
Well, even people who think they understand how it works, Paolo, think, okay, I'm going to get a DNA test and it's going to tell me my ethnic heritage. Maybe you're 25% Filipino, 25% Italian, and many other ethnicities. But what most people don't realize is that in order for these companies to figure out what ethnicity you are, they have to have these huge data banks with more and more people, and they're also connecting you to those people. So when you get the DNA result, it doesn't just tell you what your ethnic heritage is, it's also showing you who your close relatives are. And most of us think we know who our close relatives are, but this is really showing huge surprises, things that you never thought could happen. There have been studies out there that show that some ethnic groups, when people take these DNA tests in certain groups, up to 10% of people find out that one of their parents is not their parents. Now, that seemed ridiculous to me until it happened in my own family. So what we're showing in the series are the very many different ways, the different stories that can happen after you take a DNA test and become suddenly family with a whole group of people you never met before.
Wow, I can't wait. Actually, now DNA is big business, and so you found a lot of resistance from big companies to telling these true life stories. What did you go up against?
Well, the DNA industry is going to be worth about $10 billion by next year, and they have a vested interest in wanting to show positive ads for DNA testing. This is incredible. This is everything I wanted to know. But they really don't want to show the other side, which is this huge amount of people like my family. We weren't looking for anything in particular. We weren't trying to solve a mystery. And then all of a sudden this was thrown at us. So a lot of these companies are paying very big media organizations to do positive stories. And so when you want to tell the real stories that are happening to more and more people, you find a lot of resistance. So I was lucky that CNN Philippines is invested in investigative journalism, taking a long time to follow these stories, years to follow some of these families, to tell the true stories of what's happening. And there's a lot of shame that people feel because so much of the media isn't telling the true story. And now through this partnership, we have the chance to do it right on our own platform.
All right, now speaking of stories, Samuel, you had 3 bombshells in your own family. Tell us what you discovered in your own lineage and how did it affect you?
Yeah, we had, starting off, I had a cousin who disappeared in the 80s, and we believed that he had died of AIDS. And when we got the DNA test, we found out that there was an entirely different story, and finally got closure to this case. After that, my mom found a sister that she didn't know about at our same synagogue. We're Jewish, and you're actually seeing our families together there now. And at our very same synagogue, a woman from another family turned out to be my mom's sister. And then after that, my dad took a DNA test, and we were expecting it to come back Jewish, and it came back part Mormon. And I didn't even think, how could a religion show up on a DNA test? And it turned out that my dad and I aren't even related to the Burke family, and really showed a side of our family that we had no idea about. And now we've had a chance to meet some of these Mormon family members. And it really taught me a lot about what it means to be family, and so many parts of life that you don't see. They're there, but you can't see them. And some of them are secrets, and some of them are things that nobody knows. And I think the truth really came to the surface by taking these DNA tests.
Mm-hmm. Now, Samuel, in the podcast, you've spent years following families around the world, including a Filipino family, and you have strong Filipino connections as well. How did this family story impact you?
Well, this is incredible because I think this family really embodies the title, Suddenly Family. These two seemingly different families from two different parts of the earth. A man in Alabama who finds a connection with a man from the Philippines, from Olongapo City. And so I wanted you to take a listen so you can hear how their mystery starts to unravel.
He had told me a story about going into the Philippines and trying to smuggle alcohol back onto the ship.
The name she gave him was made up. It was totally fictitious.
There's no way that information would have gotten overseas. It just wouldn't have happened. And I thought, maybe I'm better off leaving this alone.
That's the man from Alabama you're hearing who finds out he's related to this Filipino man, and he has to make a decision. Will he tell his family or not? So he's really holding the fate of this other man in his hands, having to make this decision. Will we connect these two families or not? And what really moved me is that these families, despite being so different in so many ways, found these amazing connections. And as we were documenting this family, actually somebody in the family who we'd been interviewing passed away. And so we're with them with this tragedy, and we see how a DNA test can bring together two very different groups of people and really make them one. And I think it's really a story that everybody around the world will connect with, but especially people in the Philippines will be able to see that DNA testing is changing everybody's lives, including there in the Philippines.
On the idea of family, Samuel, the podcast is called Suddenly Family, and you say in the series, your goal is to find out what the true meaning of family is. Surely it's more than just being biologically related to someone, or does finding out that you're not biologically related to someone change the meaning of family? What's it all boiled down to?
Yeah, it was really strange for me when I realized that so many of the people in the pictures that are hanging in my house I'm not actually related to. And so you have this moment where you realize, well, there's somebody out there who looks just like me. My mom has this sister that she's just found out about who looks so similar to her. And is that what makes you family, if you look like somebody? But what about people who might be adopted and they've had families who've loved them their whole lives? So I think it's this deep exploration of what truly connects us. Is it blood? Is it the time we've spent together? And I can honestly say that part of this journey was for me to figure out, how do I treat these new people that are suddenly very closely related to me, but I've never met before? And I really got the answer in the series. I mean, from the very first episode, we hear from a woman who talks about family are the people who show up for you. Forget the DNA, forget the time that you've known them. Another woman who really has 6 different parents, we interview her, and she talks about the unconditional love and the amount of time that you spend with somebody who really creates those familiar relationships. But I think it's so incredible how some of these people, even though they've never met before, they're just starting to get to know each other. And these ties do bring them together, and they create these incredible relationships. And in a short amount of time, they can become family. But it really is about commitment and showing up. And so I think if you've ever had a family issue, if you've ever fought with someone in your family, if there's a loved one that maybe you're estranged from, this series can help answer some of those questions about what we can do to be there for each other, whether we just found out we're related or we've been related and living in the same house our entire lives. You never know. Paolo, it could be you and I one day who take a DNA test and we find out that we're much closer than we ever could have imagined.
Who knows? Who knows, right? Really looking forward to this series. Thank you so much, Samuel. That was Samuel Burke. You can already subscribe to the podcast for free on Spotify and everywhere you can get podcasts. Samuel, thank you so much.